ask yourself, how is it possible that a man who was born in Bethlehem, but is a Nazarite, spoke Aramaic and Hebrew, grew up to start a mission in the Middle East and pick 12 disciples, and all of them have English names? John, Peter, Mark, Bartholomew.
Deconstructionists, let's not get caught making the wrong arguments. Although I know on the basis those seems like great arguments, but in all actuality they're not. When you look at the argument that he's making, he's saying that how can a person be born in Bethlehem yet be called a Nazarene or a Nazarite? Well, easily. My daughter Sydney was born in Germany, but her parents were Americans, so she's both German and American. Plus, you're looking at a literary character where where the authors were trying to make it match up to the Old Testament by saying that he came out of Bethlehem. So both maneuvered some way of getting him to Bethlehem to be born, but the parents coming out of Nazareth. So they're both just made up stories. But it's easily understood. He grew up in Nazareth. He was born in Bethlehem. This is the reason why he was born in Bethlehem. There was a census being done. So he's born in Bethlehem. I'll get into that a little bit later. But he's born in Bethlehem because Joseph had to go to his ancestral home, which is Bethlehem. Easily understood, easily explained, rather, with their biblical narratives and stories. Now, the other part is that he's this Aramaic Hebrew guy who starts a movement, and he got disciples named Mark, Matthew, Luke, John, Bartholomew, all these names. Transliteration. For every name, almost, there is an equal translation. Okay? So, but then you get names that do not translate over. My middle name is Dwayne. When I took French class, there is no translation for Dwayne in French. It's not a French name. So I had to take on the name Didier because it was the closest name to Dwayne that I liked. So in French class, I was called Didier. Don't y'all start calling me Didier. So my Dwayne was a transliteration, not a translation. So what they've done is when it was written into the Greek, those Hebrew names were transliterated into the Mark, Matthew, Luke, John, and so on and so forth, and then carried on up into English. So that's not a great argument, and we have to be mindful of making those kinds of arguments. Even when people jump out and say, well, the J wasn't invented. Jesus is a transliteration of the name Yashu. Yashu, the Greeks did not have the sounds to say Yashu, so there was no Joshua in the Greek, so they transliterated to mean a god that saves or a Zeus that saves, which is Ius, and then in Latin that becomes Isus, and then in the English, after the J was invented, Jesus. So it's a transliteration, not a mistranslation, and we have to think about those kinds of things. And just a little bit about when was Jesus born. Jesus could not have been born at the time frame that any one of those books says that he was born in, and the Gregorian calendar is way off as far as what year it is when it's concerning that. And I'm not talking about how the Ethiopian calendar is different, and the Chinese calendar is different, and the Jewish calendar is different. Everybody can have a different calendar, but this calendar is supposed to be based on the birth of Jesus. It is already incorrect because it didn't account for year 0, so that already throws it off. The second part, the census was done by Quirinus. Quirinus was done in 6 CE. All right. So if Jesus was born 6 CE, then we're off by another 6 years. If he was born in 6 CE. Now, if he wasn't born in 6 CE, even if you go by the Matthew story, then he was born at a time frame when Herod was still the king. Herod either died in 1 BCE or 4 BCE. And Jesus had been gone for 12 years before you see Jesus coming back to Jerusalem. So at the greatest amount of time frame, you add 12 years to the 4, and then you get 16 BCE. or you add it to the 1 and you got 13 BCE. So the Jesus carrier should have been born back then. So that means that we are 13 years ahead, technically 14 years ahead, or 17 years ahead, because the year 0 wasn't part of the equation. So those are inerrancies in the Bible that created inerrancies in the way we view time. We all know that time is an illusion, but just want to throw that little nugget in there at the end, since I mentioned it as part of my explaining why we have to be concise and about the information that we pass, and as far as being deconstructionists. Because any chink in our armor that we cannot go back when we're just taking this religion apart, we have to be as concise as possible. Not that we can't make mistakes, because I was about to say that, but not that we can't make mistakes. We all make mistakes. Nobody's perfect, and information changes. So, but we do have to strive to be as accurate as possible. And that's what I strive to do. That's why when I don't know something, I say I don't know. If it's possibilities, I say, well, maybe, most likely, or this is the most likely scenario. And then I say, if something is, then it just is. And I know that there are people out there who can't understand that, but they'll be all right. So y'all have a great day. And remember always, you have to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibrations.